there is a lot of misconception and stigma about these ways of thinking, these cognitive abilities, because most often when people hear about ADHD and about autistic individuals, they think that there is something in some way fundamentally wrong with this person. And a big part of what we want to do here is to counter that issue. Being autistic and having ADHD are, in a lot of respects, really just different ways of thinking and processing and being in the world. And they are not things that make someone fundamentally worse, but a reason why we do need to discuss them is because it does mean that due to these ways of processing certain types of information differently, that there needs to be some amount of understanding that is being lent to people who are coming from these identities. There needs to be different approaches that are being engaged, because of course not everyone is the same, but I say this frequently. If there is one group of people who is more diverse than, like, any person you meet in this group is going to be completely different from anyone else you'll meet in this group, it is autistic individuals. And you're probably noticing that I've been saying autistic individuals instead of someone with autism. And that is because I think, for me and a lot of other autistic people, using that identity first language is a major demonstration of the fact that autism isn't a disease. It's not something that is problematic. It is just part of who we are. We would be completely different people if we did not think and process in this way. And I personally would much rather be the person that I am, because I don't think that there is anything that is amiss. So just to now go into, unless Netanel has something to add.
I do. I want to say that we're right now talking about our own experiences and also our own knowledge of autism. The thing about autism is this is autism, not ADHD, is it's a very broad terminology. So there is, and there are people that have autism that because of autism are in incredible physical pain and everything like that. Now, the issue is someone like us and someone like that and this have the same thing, or should they? Those are different topics and really what we're going to be getting into. What I want to say is autism is complicated, and we're not trying to dismiss the people that have autism, that their skin hurts constantly. But the thing is, their experience is so different than ours that it's not really helpful to call them the same, to say we have the same thing. I just wanted to clarify, when we're talking about autism as an identity and how we feel proud, we understand that there are other experiences that are different than that.
So moving back to talking about the autistic experience in this regard, as Netanel brought up, it is probably an entirely different conversation to say whether everyone who is diagnosed with autism can all be really put under the same umbrella. As I said earlier, everyone who is diagnosed as being autistic is also vastly different from everyone else. But to give some amount of a broad spectrum, the basic layout of how I guess I would define autism is that there is usually a correlation with some difficulty following normative social cues. This is mostly because language can be taken very literally, because there is less of that attunement with the subtleties and implicit statements that someone might not be directly giving when it comes to usage of language. And because of these confusions, there can often be a lot of difficulties and complications. There is also often a high sensitivity to their surroundings. I know that I can speak for myself by saying that I have a very difficult time when there is a lot of noise going on in the background, or when there are like other sorts of like strong sensory things that are going on, because we're just in general, which can have its upsides and its downsides. I think, for instance, that as a result of that, I might be a little more empathetic towards what is going on in my surroundings, as well as more observant as to what's going on around me. Because autism, in order to demonstrate to you all that it's not something that is inherently negative, there are a lot of what I might say, I guess, are pros and cons. It's just there's a lot of differences in how things are being processed, which comes with its own advantages and disadvantages. As I've already stated, autism is not a sickness, and this is important to restate because there are some organizations, and unfortunately a lot of therapeutic practices as well, which treat autism as something which is problematic and which a cure for it needs to be found. And this is especially damaging when it comes to certain groups like Autism Speaks, which I'll talk about just briefly, who have this message of trying to support autistic individuals, but they do it in a way where it's really all about we're trying to help these disabled, disordered people by trying to find a cure. They put a lot of money to research a cure, which of course doesn't. And there's also a lot of demonstrations about how they're not actually actively looking for our best interest, because one of the main things that they have is they don't have autistic individuals on their board. So they don't actually have any autistic voices.
It's also, I would like to add that if you were to Google Autism Speaks Judge Roenberg Center, the Judge Roenberg Center is, I believe, a school that has done electroshock therapy and other horrific, maybe that's the only horrific practice, on children, autistic children. And the Autism Speaks for a while worked with it. Look at through it yourself. That Autism Judge Roenberg Center does not currently do such things, but it's just an addition to say that, this is not neither of these organizations are trying to help us.
And now to touch more briefly on ADHD. So very often there is a lot of confusion between ADHD and autism as well, because there's usually a lot of crossover between how it affects how people process information. There is a lot of the similarities, like with a sensitivity to the environment. and things of that nature. The other main things that are probably notable with ADHD is that there can be a lot of energy that needs some sort of release. This isn't always energy specifically in a physical term, though that happens often. And a lot of this energy, when I'm able to harness this energy, which is an inherent part of me, I can use it in getting a lot of things done and being extremely productive and things like that. And it's really just all about finding ways to help me process it in a healthy manner. And other aspects of it as well can be I wouldn't necessarily say a lack of focus. I think that is incorrect. I would say that a better description would be of hyper focus. And it could mean that you could hyper focus on one specific thing and have a very hard time moving away from those things. But it could also mean that if something is going on in your environment, that because you're being so attuned to what's going on around you, that your attention immediately snaps to that change that is occurring in the environment. And now I believe that you have a sufficient understanding of what these identities are and what they might look like, though of course, as I said, a lot of these can appear in very different ways. And also knowing that these people aren't necessarily, autistic individuals are not less intelligent or necessarily less capable than any other people are. Their needs are just different. Maybe in a little more of an extreme way than the fact that everyone's needs to some extent are different. And with that, I will now move over to Netanel, who will talk about his own experience in the synagogue space.
So I have not felt comfortable in a shul in many years. When I was very young, I would go to shul and it was very loud, and I was, as was pointed out, I was very sensitive to noise. I also I would also be loud for many different reasons. I can't remember all of them. Maybe I was just playing an imaginary game and I wasn't paying attention to, the adults around me, or I could get upset very easily. And adults would shush me. And this isn't even really about autism. As a general rule, adults shouldn't shush kids for being loud. I don't think that would work. I don't think that works. I think that just makes the kid, I know it made me feel bad. I'm not sure can't speak about anyone else. But also maybe assume that the kid has a reason for being loud or is not trying to be an issue. And even if the kid's a troublemaker, the worst thing you can do by not shushing the kid is not make a troublemaker feel bad, which is not the greatest crime in the world. You can allow that to happen and maybe tell their parent if you know who their parent is, or just let it happen and ignore them. So that was, there was also, but not just shushing. There would also be just, adults could be mean. Children could get very mean and bully me. I would go to me and Kasriel would go to the boiler room because that was quiet. There were people there, so it was both safe in a sensory issue and safe in terms of loudness, and not in terms of no one being there to bother us, but then for physical safety reasons, we would be asked to leave or told to leave. And that would make us feel unsafe again. And then oftentimes we were told to leave in a harsh way. Again, I'm sure the adults there were doing that probably for our safety, and they were harsh then because they wanted us to really get it. And overall, shul has just like all of those aspects has made shul become a very negative experience, which I don't really ever like going to shul. I only go when I really have to. And I feel it's important for shuls to, first of all, make sure adults just, when a kid, this again goes for anything. Kid is autistic, kid is very loud for some other reason, kid is a troublemaker. Have adults be kind, be sensitive. They're a little kid, be welcoming, even if you find them incredibly annoying. Have a way, like a place that like maybe have like sound canceling headphones. I mean, non-electronic ones, so maybe just headphones to make everything less loud would be good. Also having a space for autistic people to go to if things get too crazy, even with headphones. Sorry. Even with headphones, but not a space that like is also used for like young children, because if you're like 13 or 14, you don't want to feel like you have to choose between, oh, everything's not right, everything's loud, I don't feel comfortable, I feel like everything's going crazy, I feel like I'm about to explode. But do I really want to go into the room with the stuffed animals and saying the ABCs on the posters and feel like a little kid and not feel like that? It's a really bad place for people to be in. Even if you're like 8, that just feels wrong. Don't have it be even if it's not even a designated room, but a room that people that could go regardless of age, and maybe some adults who are autistic would find that really helpful. And while they're almost certainly not going to complain as much as a 15-year-old about something that says like that is planning out the olive, but it would still be more appropriate. Groups, there's also, it's really important because inclusion is not really a great thing. You have to, eventually autistic people are going to have to go into a world where people are not going to treat them as equals, where people are going to assume that they're stupid, or even just ignoring us. Even if we talk about everyone's just being as wonderful and kind and understanding as possible, they're going to be in a world that's still, it's still like they're speaking a different language than them. When they act one way, they are acting how they think, and how I think makes complete sense. And the rest of the world seems to be acting in a completely crazy way, but the rest of the world's the majority. So they have to follow it. And that is, so giving people time to feel comfortable and feel with their people is really important. So I think groups of autistic people separated by age, so that again, you don't want the 15-year-old going to the same group as the 6-year-old, because that's really hurtful to the 15-year-old. It's really cool for the 6-year-old, but it's really hurtful for the 15-year-old. So you have groups separated by age, but specifically for autistic individuals, and you either have parents, trained professionals, or if both of those are impossible, because I understand both of those are hard, group leaders that really, really understand what they're doing, that it's important that they understand what they're, I'm repeating myself, but that's incredibly important. It's why it's much better to have a trained professional or a parent, because dealing with us when you're from the outside is really hard, just like how it's really hard for us to deal with you because you look from the outside. I understand that parents have things that they have to do. There's a limited budget that you can't, but it is important that the head of a group knows what they're doing.
And I think this goes back to a concept that I think probably should be clarified a little bit, which is that a big issue that a lot of autistic individuals, myself, Netanel, plenty of other people that we know have to deal with is constantly being talked down to, which is usually the issue when you are dealing with people in authority or group leaders or things like that, is because often, because of these associations that people who are autistic or have ADHD or whatever are less capable or are at a quote unquote lower level, that a lot of people then as a result kind of default to speaking to them as if they were lower, speaking down to them. And that is a major issue, and why in a lot of these cases, as Natal's been mentioning, it's very important to have someone who is a trained professional, or at the very least having people who are cognizant of this and of all of the awarenesses that they need to have when working with people who just think differently. They're not necessarily lesser. And I also wanted to interject with something about the groups in the matter of, it's not necessarily that we should only have that neurodivergent individuals should not be allowed in the other groups, but more that there should be this space for them. And if those individuals feel like they can be in a group with other people their own age who are neurotypical, which is not neurodivergent, then they should be able to.
I want to add, though, and it's important, 2 points. One, that the talking down to doesn't necessarily have to be malicious or like cruel. It could be like talking down to us like we're young children when we're not. But second, I want to say that it's important to separate the groups. That if an autistic individual wants to go into a group with the neurotypical people, it's important that it's not because it's seen as these groups are inferior and that going to a neurotypical group is an upgrade, that they get to the better group. If it's because they want to spend time with their friends who are in the other group, of course, or for whatever reason, they like the group leader better, or a million other reasons. But if it's because there's a thought process, either because of how it's thought, either because of how it's treated by other people, or because of how it is in reality, the autistic group is, or neurodivergent group is lower, is worse, and people want to get out to the neurotypical group because then they're no longer in the bad group, then that's a problem with how the autistic group is functioning. And it's often, and this is like a big problem that can happen with inclusion is having neurotypical people be taught that they are ahead of the autistic individuals, not like in the sense that you're a higher human being or something like, I don't want to say grand, like not something evil like that. But something, but like, it's like neurotypical people are supposed to mentor neurodiverse people, even if they're the same age. Neurotypical people are put in higher level groups, even if for seemingly no reason other than the fact that they're neurotypical, and that brings about a mentality that to some degree already exists, but this just makes it worse.
All right, Kasriel and Netanel, let me, if it's okay, if I can jump in for a second. This has been so instructive, so important. I know I have a bunch of questions. I'm sure other people have questions. So people are more than welcome to put some questions in the chat. Maybe I'll start with a question for the two of you. You've talked a lot about the groups, and you've talked a lot about having spaces that are safe, that are comfortable. What about the actual davening space, the actual, main sanctuary? How can shoals do better? What are some pitfalls? What are some things that we should be thinking about to make the actual davening space? And what does it mean to have a davening space that fits 400 people? Does that even make sense? Are there different kinds of minyan structures? If you can share some of your experience with that, we would really, really benefit from that. And as I mentioned, people can be prepared to either ask questions. You can unmute yourself afterwards, or if you put them in the chat, I can certainly read them, and then Kasriel and Netanel can answer them.
So for the davening space, two things are important. One, headphones, because of the noise, would be extremely helpful for autistic people. But a second thing that's important is that sometimes, like, too many people in a davening space is going to be an issue no matter what. And again, as Kasriel pointed out, that everyone's different, and that you can't just say, oh, autistic people can't handle X amount of people. Some autistic people probably can handle a lot of people better than some neurotypical people. But speaking from my own experience, when you get to a certain level of people, nothing you can do will make can make it like comfortable. So just having like a minion like that has or several minions that has like a small seating amount as a would be good, and not like, oh, only autistic people can go to that minion, because then it feels bad. And also non-autistic people might prefer small minions. It would just be good for shul in general to have a lot of options for small minions for people that prefer it. And a lot of people prefer large minions. I mean, more options is better.
I think also it should be worth noting that the headphones that we're mentioning, obviously there are concerns about like Shabbos and stuff like that. So these would be Shabbos appropriate headphones, ones that are not actually electronic. Noise canceling ones would probably be preferable, but even stuff like earplugs would probably at least work as a opening solution. Also, because we haven't highlighted ADHD as much, having tools available like fidget tools like stress balls and fidget cubes or things of that nature is also just a very useful way to allow someone to alleviate that energy in a silent and non-disruptive manner. And then having those tools available in these safe spaces that we mentioned as well would also be incredibly helpful.
I also want to add, and this is to not take away the point about earplugs. Earplugs can be painful to some people because of sensitivity. That isn't to say that you shouldn't have earplugs, because of course you can just, an autistic individual can just not have an earplug, or if it turns out that they're going to get hurt by it, like they put it, their parent tells them put in the earplug, they put it in, it hurts, they take it out. It was like 2 seconds of like, it's not a big deal. But it's just important to note that like earplugs won't work for everyone. They're not the perfect solution if you can't get headphones.
Well, I'm hoping that some people have some questions. Hopefully people will have some questions, but maybe one more question that I can ask you. I know you've given us a lot of information, which is so important for us to process, but I know that sometimes the way that these presentations really have an impact is if when we hear personal, narratives, things that have actually happened to you. So if maybe for both of you, you can think back to growing up, if maybe there's an example or two of something that you can bring out where, something where it really helped, or, without naming specific institutions, or something where maybe it didn't work, and give us something concrete, maybe perhaps in terms of a narrative, something that happened to you, an experience. I think that might really for help us all really try to understand and try to work on that. So for both Netanel or Kasriel, whoever wants to say, if you can think back.
So an experience that was really great. It was not inside the Jewish community. It was from elementary school till high school. I was in a school for autistic and for neurodiverse people. It wasn't just autistic individuals, ADHD people, and everyone else was there. And there was just the fact that it was completely normal. That, I mean, it's not even a good way of saying it. Completely normal. They didn't have to normalize it. Everyone was that. There wasn't a single, like, it was great because like there were, like, I don't say that there weren't rules you had to follow, but like it was great because having a place where where you don't feel awkward and wrong, you don't feel like you're, was it that Temple Grandin's term, anthropologist, not an anthropologist, an anthropologist on Mars, like where you don't feel like everyone's speaking where everyone's like in a alien culture, was so wonderful. And and this isn't really something for the shul, but it'd be really amazing if there could be a Jewish school that can do that, because it was really sad that there had to be a choice between Jewish education and an education where I could actually succeed and grow and not feel terrible every day. Obviously, I got the right one, but like, I mean, that's not really a point about the shul, but a place where you can act like yourself, where you don't have to fit the standards of a world that's completely different, is great.
I also want to bring up that it's not as if these programs where Natal and I have found a lot of support don't exist in the Jewish community, but unfortunately they're very much lacking in terms of the Orthodox community. Like me and Natal can both talk about how we went to Camp Yofi, which was a family camp at Ramat Darom, and how those were like very impactful experiences for us, and were the first time that we really like spent sort of like a camp experience away from home for a decent amount of time. And it was definitely very impactful in terms of how we were able to grow in that regard. So I think really it is just about being cognizant of these differences and doing your best to try and make those changes happen. And then I don't think there needs to be this separation between like Orthodox Judaism and other forms of Judaism, or between Judaism and the non-Jewish worlds, in order to make people of different neurotypes feel welcome.
Thank you. That was really great. Is there anybody from in the audience that would like to ask a question, or perhaps you can also put some? Julie, you have to unmute yourself though. You can't? How about now?
Now I can. Thank you. Yeah, you have to, I don't think we can speak.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so maybe if you have a question, you could raise your hand and then I'll be able to unmute you. I didn't realize that it was set up that way. But yes, Julie, if you could just
So first of all, I just want to say to Kasriel and Netanel, Kol HaKavod, thank you for sharing, for being so wise, for teaching us. And I guess my question is this, and I'm really trying to work it out in my head, understanding that once you meet one neurodiverse person, you meet one neurodiverse person. So would it be a good practice for a shul to go out of its way to try to, if the neurodiverse person was interested, willing, and comfortable, to be involved in the service in a very obvious way, to sort of try to normalize or call attention to being a part of the community writ large? What do you think about that idea?
No.
So I think that there's two different elements to this, which is that I think, of course, if it is the kind of community where members of the congregation can participate like if it's a minyan where they can get like someone to chazan who is just part of the community. And of course, if someone who's neurodivergent wants to do that, then they should certainly be allowed to do that. I do think that there can certainly be a merit to allowing, like how what me and Netanel are doing right now, to allowing neurodiverse individuals to speak about their experience and to give their advice and suggestions. But we also need to be very careful about tokenizing.
Yeah, so I hope I didn't misunderstand your question, but I think like I feel like the problem with what you said is it sounds like you're putting that, again, I understand that you're saying if that person wants this, but even with that as an issue, even with that caveat, that's like saying, look at us, we're so wonderful and welcoming. Look, ask our resident neurodiverse person. Like if you switch that to, look at our resident Black member of this community, look, a resident gay member, like, isn't like, that's, I don't mean to attack you, but that feels very, and I'm glad you asked, but it feels very dirty, even if the person themselves is completely fine, because it does tokenize them. Obviously welcoming them, but putting them in the limelight to show how welcoming you are. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I really appreciate that, Netanel. And I guess my sort of, my undercurrent was a message to my beloved rabbis that they shouldn't shy away from asking neurodivergent people to participate. So that was my intent, but I really appreciate your perspective and sharing how that felt for you. And certainly that wasn't my goal. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we do have some questions in the chat. Deborah asked, tell us what you are doing or working. What are you guys up to right now? Are you guys working? Are you in school? What kinds of programs are you involved in right now?
So I'll let Netanel speak for himself, but I am in my senior year of undergraduate college at Lesley University. I'm also currently, though not for much longer, the president of the Lesley Hillel. Once I graduate, then it's going with me. And I am going to start doing some, I have done quite a few like internships and summer jobs and things like that, but I will be starting doing some real scouring the land for a actual like more long-term job once that is over, before going to grad school. And that is pretty much where I am at right now. I majored in art therapy.
I am a junior at Adelphi, majoring in history. Specifically, don't need to go into the details. But yeah, I'm going to be working hard in the summer during doing a senior thesis. But yeah, that's,
Netanel, have you decided what the topic of your thesis is yet?
yes.
Can you share it with us?
Okay, I don't want to derail this.
Here.
If anyone can notice my background, it is Roman. I like Roman history, and I am doing my senior thesis on Tiberius Julius Alexander, which this shouldn't become an entire thing of me going on about Tiberius Julius Alexander and his interesting life. That's not what we're here for. I encourage everyone to Google.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, I have it.
Or we could read your thesis.
I have another question. Someone sent me a private question. They wanted to know if you're willing to share at what point, for the two of you, and it's obviously a different answer for both of you, you realized that you were autistic, that you were an autistic individual. Like, how did you come to that self-awareness, and what did that mean for you?
I mean, that's a little complicated. I don't remember when I got my diagnosis. I think probably around when I got my diagnosis, if not sometime afterwards, is when I became aware of the fact that I was autistic. But I think for quite a while, I probably noticed that the way that I interacted with the world was very different from how other people did. I just didn't necessarily have a label for that. And same thing applies for like being ADHD. For me, those two things like overlap significantly.
It took me so I don't know when I kind of know when I was diagnosed, not in like the sense, but I kind of can figure out like there are several possibilities of what I was that went through the phases. So I kind of have like a timeline, even if not an exact time, but I don't remember when I learned I was autistic. I just kind of know when my parents figured it out about. But I don't know. I didn't actually, it took me a long time to realize I was different because everything seemed like, because I didn't understand, like, for example, like if you were like, what's a good one? Like, for example, you were like, well, you know, when you say things and you mean something else, I never got that. I still don't get that. I still don't. So for a long time, it wasn't like, oh, someone's saying something and they're meaning something else, but that doesn't make sense. When I say something, I say something. No, it just obviously I was just like, oh, they're saying something, they must mean that thing. And every time they would tell me, you know, I meant something else, I think, okay, this is the one time exception when what they're saying meant something else. And every other time it follows the same basic rule of what you say means what you say. And it took me a long time to figure that out. And I think it took me after I went to the school for neurodiverse people. After that, it took me a long time to realize I was different, because when I was in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, I didn't feel different. I just, I mean, I didn't notice that everyone else, I mean, I had a bad time. I was bullied and all that stuff, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm separate from everyone else. Everything made sense. It took longer to realize, oh, I was doing something wrong, or to some degree, no, everyone else, you know.
No, it's very interesting. I'm just as I'm listening to what you're saying. So when you now have an understanding that some people say things and they don't really mean it, it's an intellectual understanding. You understand that that's the case because you realize that that's true, but you don't have a personal experience of ever wanting to do that. So it's kind of an interest. I'm sure that there are other things in life as you process things that it's really more of an intellectual understanding that that's the case without having that personal experience. It's just so interesting, you know, hearing that perspective, which I've never, you know, thank you. Is there anybody else that has any questions? You can put them in the chat. I think I finally figured out how to allow people to unmute themselves. So I do think that you're able to unmute yourself if you want to. I mean, we have been going on already for almost 50 minutes, so we could end now. But if anyone have any final questions? How about Netanel okay, Freida Paskow. Freida, you should be able to unmute. You can't unmute yourself? All right, let me,
Yeah.
okay.
Now, I want to say thank you to both of you for sharing with us. It tremendously informative, and I really appreciate your willingness and openness to all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm going to give it, oh, we do have one more question in the chat here. Mindy asks, first of all, she says, as we're all thinking, you guys are terrific. This is a hard question. Do you think it's going to be challenging to stay in the Orthodox Jewish community where, face it, there is a lot of conformity and a lot of shul? How do you feel now about fitting in and how shuls can help you?
So this has been a very big deal for me. So Netanel had a very different experience than I did, not just with shul, but also with the thing that I'm about to talk about, which is, so after we went to Camp Yofi, our parents were looking for us for a special needs program that we could go to for a overnight camp, and they found Camp Ramah in Wisconsin, and they had the TIKVA program at the time, which was their neurodiversity program. Netanel did not have a good experience there. I had a much more helpful experience there, and I think honestly, if it wasn't for my experience there at this conservative camp, that I probably would not have developed that much of a connection with Judaism, because my entire experience prior to that was not the same as Netanel, but very similar to Netanel, where I just felt like this isn't a space where I feel welcome and things like that. Whereas at this camp, I was given opportunity to actually like sit and learn the tefillot and take them in a sizable portions, where I felt like I could be part of a more inclusive Jewish community, and a Jewish community with people of similar ages, and where I also was able to get some level of agency and independence in my own religious practice, because there I was, for instance, encouraged to lead Kabbalat Shabbat for the first time, and that was like a big moment in like forming my Jewish practice for me. So I do think that there are ways, and of course, like I came back to Orthodox Judaism after that, because that was still the community that I was in, but now I came back to it with a greater understanding and a greater comfort with my own Jewish experience. And so I do think that it's possible, and that a lot of it is about that level of inclusion and welcomingness. And I would argue, and I think it depends a lot also on the community, because I would argue that there are a significant number of Orthodox communities where it's not necessarily about conformity. And I think that it is those messages of conformity which are the things that have a tendency to bog people down and make people feel like they're not welcome.
So my experience is completely different. I am not a part of the Orthodox community. I almost never go to shul, but I'm an Orthodox Jew, and the reason is I kind of came from it from an intellectual perspective. I don't mean to sound super arrogant and like that's not what I meant, but what I mean is I kind of came to be a part of Orthodoxy because so for whatever reason, and I don't know why, I have a close relationship with God. Again, I sound so, but what I mean is that so like, but like, so that was something, but that didn't necessarily mean, so that made me very much stay Jewish because of that, because that's how I viewed God and like, but Orthodoxy, I essentially became Orthodox because of these religious beliefs and viewing the Torah as the word given to God to the Jewish people, and that being my people, and Orthodoxy just being correct in my like from a like that's where I came from, is like I thought about it and I'm like, Orthodoxy is of all the religions, Judaism is probably the correct one, and of all the sects of Judaism, Orthodoxy is probably the correct one. But correct, I do not mean the least problematic by any means. I mean, like, the ones that like is most fulfilled is the one that is following the one. I am sounding so mean to conservative reformists, but that's where I came from. Is it has nothing to do with the community or anything like that. And had I come with a different conclusion, I mean, I probably wouldn't. I could have become. I don't know if because I never really. I could have become Muslim, or I could have become or I could have become. I mean, that's weird putting these into two, or a deeply religious Reform Jew. I know those are very different things, but I'm using those as two examples of like the two different things. It's how I ended up, my intellectual life guided me the where I am. And that I think that that my parents get a huge amount of the credit for that. Not that they forced it on me, because if they forced it, I'm getting off topic here. I am sorry.
No, Netanel, it was great. Your answer was perfect, and it's amazing. This conversation, we've learned about shul, about spaces, about things. We've gotten into theology. I mean, really, we've really had a wonderful conversation with you, and I can just tell from people's comments and their facial expressions that people are so grateful to you. I want to thank both of you for coming and bringing your full selves and opening yourself up to questions, challenging questions, and really helping us learn. So I'm really grateful. I also want to thank Rabbi Cooper, who has been sort of in the background. As you know, they just had a wonderful baby, and but Rabbi Cooper really spent a lot of time with Netanel and Kasriel to really plan this program. So I'm really grateful to Rabbi Cooper for doing that. And both Rabbi Cooper and myself, and I know our whole show, we really want to make a commitment to not only have this as a 1-hour evening program, but really take these ideas, and we're gonna call you back. We're gonna, if you're willing to be a resource for us, to really try to help make improvements in our shul and really do things to, it can't just be about midrash. Lo ha-midrash hu ha'ikar el hamasa. It can't just be about what we're talking about. It's about what we're going to do. So we're really going to make an attempt to do whatever we can and consult with people in our shul, but also, of course, consult back with you. So we're really, really so grateful. I know everybody here is, and I just want to wish everybody a good night. Oh, do we have a raised hand from?
Also,
No.
I wanted to bring up one thing since you are talking about like moving forward. Very quick note, because we mentioned Autism Speaks, I should mention the organization that is supportive, which is the Autism Self-Advocacy Network. So just want to leave that as throw it as a shout out before closing out. And thank you, Rabbi, for taking over as well.
My pleasure. It was a true honor. Wishing everybody a Laila Tov. Good night. Thank you so much. Feel free to unmute yourself as we finish the program, just to say good night. Feel free to unmute yourself. And good night. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Laila
Thank
Tov. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Night.